Recorded live in front of a feline audience. Coming to you from coast to coast. It's the Fangirl Film Club.
The Fangirl Film Club is a podcast created by adults and featuring adult themes. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back to a very special episode of the Fangirl Film Club, the movie podcast where we go deep down the resume of all your fangirl faves. Usually we talk about how we've seen some shit, but today we are talking about quality with a very special guest. Emily, would you like to intro our guest?
Yes, we are joined today by producer Nicholas Tabarrok, who comes to us from Darius Films, the company behind movies such as Art of the Steal, Defendor, and Irina's Vow. And we're so happy to have you. Welcome to the Fangirl Film Club.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, Miss Mia, you want to take us in?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote down so many questions. This is my first time interviewing a producer, so I'm very excited to
I'll try not to let you down.
It's already the best. You're already the best one we've ever interviewed. So
yeah. You're setting the bar high, no matter what. Yeah. So we've got a bunch of questions for you, but one of my first ones that I came up with that I am excited to kind of hear from you a little bit about, thinking about a moment you might have had. You've worked on a lot of movies with a lot of fantastic talent, and that was kind of what brought you to us, I think, talking about Daniel Radcliffe. So I just wanted to ask what a moment was that you had, whether that was on set or watching footage of one of your films, where you realized you were kind of witnessing somebody great or some great phenomenon in what they were doing.
Yeah, what a great question. So answer that, I think, in a couple of different ways, if I can.
Go for it.
So you referenced Art of the Steal. So that was a movie that I made with Kurt Russell was the lead in. And I grew up on Kurt Russell movies. You know, my teen years were in the 80s. And so it was, you know, The Thing and Big Trouble in Little China and, you know, all those fantastic movies that Kurt Russell made, Escape from New York. These are the movies of my childhood and teen years. And when we cast him in Art of the Steal, I remember the director and I went to his house to have a meeting. You know, it was the director's second film. His first film was a small indie. So this was, you know, Kurt Russell like, well, who is this guy going to put my trust into? So we had this meeting in person at his house. And I remember being there just thinking, like when I was a kid, when I was 10 years old and I saw The Thing, this guy was a big movie star. And here we are sitting and chatting and talking about script and talking about stories and so forth. So that was a really special moment for me. So it wasn't witnessing his work on screen. It was sort of feeling like, here's a guy that when I was 12 years old, if you said to me, you're going to be having lunch with that guy, dinner with that guy one day, I would have been, So that was a really special moment. In terms of seeing greatness on screen, you're right. I've had the really good fortune of working with some phenomenal actors. You know, Harvey Keitel, who is just a legend, and I think Martin Scorsese is probably my favorite director of all time, and of course he's a favorite of Martin Scorsese's. To have made two movies with Harvey Keitel is a real pleasure and honor. Ron Perlman, a tremendous person and a great actor. Woody, as you mentioned off the top. So I've been very fortunate. I've worked with some great actors. I think lesser known, not a household name like some of the people I just mentioned. Yeah. There's this actor Elias Koteas who may not be well known, but anyone who's listening to your show, I encourage them to look him up and check his work out. I think he's one of the greatest actors ever. I think that Elias Koteas, every time I see him on film, I've made two films with him, but anything he's done, I'm like, where's this coming from? Like, it's just, I hold his talent up to Gary Oldman, Robert De Niro, Denzel Washington, anyone other. I really think he's one of the greats. And he's got a great career and he's done very well for himself and he's super respected. But compared to his talent, the level of talent, I think he's a little unrecognized, to be honest. So that's sort of the two ways I'd answer your question. One is sort of like being a bit of to copy your show name, to be a fanboy myself. And the other is to just see somebody working on set and be blown away is what they're pulling on.
Awesome. Yeah. I loved him as an antagonist in Defendor. He was
right. Yeah.
really fun to watch.
Yeah. Me too.
So you are from the Toronto area, right? And
Originally, yeah, I live in
Yep.
Los Angeles now, but I'm
Mhm.
born and grew up in Toronto.
I have family from there, actually, from the Scarborough Pickering area. So I was
Okay, great,
yeah.
great.
But so you've been doing this for quite a while. This is your whole career. I was just wondering if you just mentioned some films that you grew up with the 80s. Was there one that you can remember that stuck out in your mind as like you watched it and you said, that's what I want to do. I want to make movies. I want to make magic like that.
A bit later, I was not, you know, you hear that story often as people fell in love with the movies in their teen years or their childhood. That wasn't my story. I loved movies like most, you know, kids did, especially of my age. You know, younger generations today have so many different options for their attention span. But you know, when I was younger, there's no TikTok, there's no
Yeah.
smartphones and so forth. So, like most kids, when you're a teen, before you're old enough to drink and go to bars, going to see a movie was like the fun, cool thing to do on a weekend. So I loved movies, but I never, as a career aspiration, it didn't happen to me then. It wasn't until I was a bit older, like in my 20s, and I'd say probably Heat, Michael Mann's Heat,
Nice.
with, you know, Robert De Niro,
Yeah.
Kilmer, and so forth. That was the film, Al Pacino, that made me say, "Oh my God, this is an art form. This like affected me so much. Like
Mhm.
I just loved the film so much
Yeah.
that I was like, to touch that as a career, to come close to that. If I could make a film 10% as good as Heat, I'll be a happy person." So I think Heat was the film that made me go, "Man, now that would be a cool thing to do."
Love it.
Awesome.
That is a great one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you've mentioned kind of with the changing of technology over time, I know there's a ton of AI content coming out these days. What I'm also curious about a little bit is thinking about with that progression of tech being so rapid and so integrated into the creative process, I feel sometimes a risk of losing soul in what you create. So, as a filmmaker, how are you trying to maintain that sense of soul for the movies you're helping to create?
I am a little bit of what's the right word? I'm not so worried about AI. I think it's a bit overblown. I think the fear of it is a little hyperbolic, and exaggerated. I think that filmmakers, creative types are going to use AI as a tool and not be replaced by it. So this is maybe a little bit of a crude comparison or a diminutive comparison, but you know, the word processor replacing a typewriter, you know, a keyboard and a word processor replacing a typewriter didn't make writing any worse. It didn't take away any iota of great quality writing. It's just using technology to make the writer's job easier. And I think the same for AI. Now, there will be jobs shifted. There will be jobs lost, you know, where I'm trying to think of an example. In animation and CGI, that's an industry which I wouldn't want to be in right now. That's an industry where if I were starting my career, I'd be a little careful about that. Where it took take a Marvel movie where it took 1,000, you know, they look at those credits, they have 1,000 CGI artists
Right.
working on a computer to make the Hulk green and jump and do whatever the Hulk does. I think that might be 10 people in a few years' time, you know? So I think there will be, and I think a loss of jobs in the short term, but there's a transition of jobs over time, you know? Um, but the creative process, you know, like will it replace writers, directors, actors, composers? I don't think so. No, I think it'll be used to help those people, to enhance those people, but I don't think it's going to replace their jobs. I'm in 10 years and 20 years, I might be proven wrong, and these words will be mocked. But I think AI is going to be a tool that will be used, not a competitor to what we do.
Well, that's so much more optimistic than like
Yeah,
anybody I've heard in the film industry talk about
yeah.
it. So
Yes.
that was nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so what exactly? Now I know I've listened to a couple of your interviews, so I've heard you kind of talk about this before. But can you just sort of give us a high level overview of what you do as a producer?
Yeah. So I was just having this email like minutes before joining this call with I won't bore you with the details, but with I was negotiating a deal with somebody.
No, tell us. Spill
No,
the
no.
tea.
I will then. Since you asked, since you invited, a writer director brought me a project, and do you want to do this with me? And I said sure, and I gave my proposal. I said, well, I want to be a producer, and my kind of soapbox is a producer credit. Unfortunately, is used as a perk, as a bargaining chip, as a little addition to a deal way too often for way too long that has devalued it, and it's sort of lost its meaning.
Mhm.
And my big frustration and annoyance is if you're trying to get an actor to be in your movie, it is so commonplace these days that the actor, the agent, the lawyer will say, okay, and they would like a producer credit. Well, nobody says that actor wants a director credit. Nobody
Right.
says, well, if you want, and I'm not picking on any individual, I'm just randomly picking a name out. You want Matt Damon in your movie, he's going to get a co-writer or a co-director.
Right.
That's insane. Nobody would think of that. But they have no problem whatsoever saying, okay, but he's getting this much money, this many flights, this per diem, and he gets a producer credit. It's just added to one of those things. And the problem with that now is that nobody knows what a producer does, and it devalues it.
Right.
And I'll tell you another story.
Yeah.
And again, it's greatly frustrating. I'm setting up a film to shoot in Italy. So I thought, what Italian TV shows and movies have been made recently that I thought were good, that might be good partners for me or good people to speak to about shooting them. So I went on IMDb. I'm sure your listeners know what IMDb is if they're interested in the film business. So I go onto IMDb and I look up Ferrari to see who the producers were. 3 producers are listed, which exactly, which is insane. There's one writer, or actually that might be not true. I can't remember exactly, but 1 or 2 writers at most, I'm sure.
Right.
1 director, 1 cinematographer, 1 composer, 1 DP, but there's 53 producers. Now, of those, there's the real producer that sort of does what I do every day, find the material, develop it, bring Michael Mann on board, hire Adam Driver, all of that. There's probably an Italian producer who made a very significant contribution by figuring out how the physical production works and all that kind of thing. And maybe there's another 1 or 2, 3 producers that were instrumental in bringing some money, bringing sales, something like that. But 53 producers, 50 of them shouldn't have that credit and shouldn't have that title. So that I went off on a little tangent there because it's as you can tell, it's something that frustrates me and I kind of am passionate about. But to answer your question, Emily, a bit more directly is, so what I do is I don't mean this to my credit because a lot of people do it and people do it more successfully than I do. So I'm not saying this makes me good at it. I'm just defining what I do. I do what a classic producer should do is just find the material. So nobody hires me. Nobody picks up the phone and says, hey, we want you to produce something. It's not a hired job. It's a job that you create yourself. So I will find a book, a magazine article, somebody brings me a script, starting with material. Almost always we hopefully make that material better. We develop it. We'll talk to the screenwriter and, this is fantastic, but what about this? Or, we didn't quite understand what happened in the 3rd arc, or, what is the character doing here exactly? So we'll have all these conversations, development, hopefully over time make the script better. Sometimes as a director, sometimes the writer is the director, more often than not, especially in the indie world. But if there isn't a director, we go and hire the director. And then once we bring the director on board, we got to do the deal with that person. And then we'll go cast the movie, which is a difficult and long process. And then then you have a script, you have a director, and you have your main cast, not your 30 speaking roles, but your 1 or 2 big roles, your Kurt Russell, your Woody Harrelsons, and so forth. Then you have what's called the package. And with that package, then you go take it to market and raise the financing, figure out what the budget is, and then you raise the money to make the movie. And then you actually physically are involved with making the movie. A producer is going to help with bringing the crew on board, picking the locations, choosing the crew. I'm not going to hire the third grip or the second driver.
Right.
But I am instrumental in who's the DP, who's the editor, who's the composer, the key, what's called key creatives, with the director, of course. But the director and I together will choose our key creatives, oversee production, and there's a line producer whose job it is to keep things on budget, and there's an AD whose job it is to keep things on schedule. However, if you're over budget or over schedule, ultimately it flows up. Ultimately, the producer has to deal with that. You can't just say, well, you figure it out. It doesn't work that way. So when you do go over budget or over schedule, or there's a problem, or the actor doesn't get out of their trailer, or God forbid, the actor's injured on set, you're going over, whatever case may happen. COVID breaks out. There's a weather issue. It's all up to the producer to figure out and put out fires. And when the film is complete, a producer involved with all of the post-production. They're involved with the edit. As a producer, I don't spend 12 weeks in the edit room. That's too insular for me. The editor and director will do that, but I always lock picture with the director. I'll never lock a film ever that I haven't looked at, given my notes on, and agreed on the final lock. So I lock the picture, help choose the music. I love selecting music. It's one of the fun parts of my job. I'm doing that right now on the last film I made. I really enjoy that step. And then you deliver the movie to the distributor, which is a messy, complicated process. And then even then, when the distributor has the movie, you are still involved to the degree they invite you to, and sometimes you butt heads, with marketing. You'll help give notes on the poster and the trailer and get it out there and choose when and where and so forth. A producer's job is really, more than any other person, including the director, right from the beginning and right to the end. So you brought up Defender and Art of the Steel. I made those movies 10, 12 years ago. Not much, but I still work on them today. It may literally be half a day a year, but there's something that comes up. There's a tax return that has to be done. SAG reaches out to me and says, have you caught up with your royalties that you have to pay the actors? There's the IRS says, have you done the da-da-da-da? So 10, 12 years later, I'm still own those films, own those companies, and I'm still working.
I would imagine with the rise of streaming that extension of the work is just going to get kind of more and more, since it used to be the films came out, then they were on DVD or whatever, and then that was and then somebody owned them, and that was kind of the end of the continuation. But with streaming, everything's and nothing stays on one streaming service, so everything kind of bounces around. I would imagine that's difficult to.
You're right, but it's in some ways the opposite. It's before we used to have 4 or 5 buyers for a film, so we would, you're exactly right. We would sell. Back then, depending how far back you go, like pay TV was the first buyer, or home video, DVDs, and then pay TV, and then free TV. Now, though, to streaming, it's kind of one sale. If you sell a film to Netflix, it's not going anywhere else. If you sell a film to Netflix, it's not going on DVD. It's not going on Stars. It's not going on HBO. It's just on Netflix. And depending on that deal, you do get the rights back, but a decade or even longer down the road. So yes, eventually the rights may come back to you, the licenses. And sometimes not even then. Sometimes Netflix is going to say, we're buying it. We own it. This is our movie. And you become more of a service producer where you know, I own, because I'm in the indie world, I own the movies that I make. But when you work for a streamer or a big studio, they own the movies, and you're not exactly working for them. You're not an employee, but you're more of a contractor, I guess, is a better way to.
Yeah. So I appreciate you brought up your key creatives, kind of the people that you have direct lines of contact with. And you've said you've had some amazing, kind of dream come true people that you've been able to work with. If you had kind of a dream for the future for key creatives that you'd like to work with, if I were making a movie, I would love to grab Michael Giacchino. I would shoot for John Williams as my producer, but I don't think he would ever take my call. I don't think Michael Giacchino would either, but shoot for the stars. Who would you kind of set in your dream casting crew?
Okay. Let me answer the shorter question first. Dream crew. You didn't give me a chance to do my homework. If I would have thought better. Because there are films craft that I love and respect, but I don't have their names top of mind, to be honest with you. Who is the composer? You may know better than I do. He's quite well known, but Succession, who composed Succession? Do you know that
That's
guy?
a great question.
I don't know.
He's amazing.
Are we going to Google real quick and act like we know?
Yeah.
We might Google real quick.
I'll know the name. As soon as you say it, I'll know his name.
Music.
I love his work. And then the Nine Inch Nails guys, they do a lot of film composing, right?
Yes.
Atticus Ross and
Trent
Reznor.
Thank you, Trent Reznor. See, I told you, if you gave me a chance.
I'm so upset. I'm so upset they're not nominated for challengers this year.
What do you mean challengers?
Oh my gosh.
Right. I mean,
maybe changed my brain chemistry.
Great. They're so great. So as composers, oh my God, it would be a dream come true to work with guys at that level.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not going to know names, but I think Denis Villeneuve,
yes,
whoever his sound team is the greatest sound team ever. Like going back to Sicario, I don't know if you remember, but that scene on the bridge where they're like, and the explosions and the gunfire and the machine gun.
So tense.
Oh my God. And then Dune, like the two Dune films, if you see that in a big theater with a great sound system, you're blown away. Like the whatever, the sandworm you're hearing over here, but this thing you're hearing over here. His sound team is incredible. I think he spends more time on sound than almost anyone. And of course, everyone Christopher Nolan works with, his editor. Yeah, so the crew folk, and this is not for lack of respect or anything, I just don't keep top of mind their names.
It's a big world.
It's a big world. Exactly. There's a lot of talent out there. And I've had the great fortune of working with Paul Sarasi, who's a phenomenal DP, Adam Suika, who's a really, really talented DP. So I've had good fortune working with good people. In terms of cast, oh my God, where do I start? I mentioned him a second ago, but these days, I think Gary Oldman is I hold him up as like one of the greatest working actors. And
absolutely.
To work with Gary Oldman, I love Slow Horses, and see his work in Slow Horses is just knocks me out. Incredible. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, De Niro is my forever, like since a teenage years, since I knew what actors' names were. He's been my hero of an actor from the beginning, And I just finished watching Netflix's Zero Day, and I thought he was great. I really enjoyed the show, and I thought he was great in it. So it goes without saying, I'd love to work with him. So yeah, there are a handful of cast that it would be a real dream come true to work with for sure. Yeah.
So I picked up the name on the composer for Succession. It looks like that's Nicholas Britell. So
Britell.
Yes.
Yeah. I should have remembered his first name. That should have stayed in my mind. But,
for your club.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say, you might go next. Okay, I didn't want to cut her off.
Yeah. No,
so you had mentioned, that you're the one who options things, even if it's like an idea or a news article or a book that you read. Which of your projects with Darius Films, if any, started out, not with a traditional screenplay, like you said?
Oh yeah, good question. Yeah, it's a really good question because we've optioned tons. I mean, we're a small company. We've optioned dozens of books over the years. Mm-hmm. One magazine article that I can think of, there's probably been. Oh no, there was another one, which I will talk about in a second. But it's a really good question. And now that you caused me to think about it, almost all of my films have been original screenplays. Yeah, most of my films have been made from original screenplays. The one that was a magazine article was Stockholm. Stockholm is the true story. Everyone knows the phrase Stockholm Syndrome, right?
Yes, right.
But myself included, I didn't know the origin of it. Where did that come from? Stockholm Syndrome. Mm-hmm. The article that we optioned was 73, but so the event was probably 1970, 71, something like that. This bank robber robbed a bank in Stockholm, Sweden, took 3 or 4 people hostage, and over the course of the siege, I think it was 6 days, those people that he kept hostage went on his side and became loyal to him and took his side over the police and protected him, in fact, from the police. So that's where we get the phrase Stockholm Syndrome. And there's a really lengthy. They don't sort of do these in-depth, deep articles anymore. But in 1973, the New Yorker had a really lengthy, deep dive article on the true events around this and how it came to be. That article gave rise to the phrase Stockholm Syndrome. And we optioned that article. And then we adapted it to a screenplay. And then that became the movie Stockholm with Ethan Hawke.
Very cool.
Yeah. There's probably a book or article that I'm forgetting about. But yeah, definitely most have been original screenplays.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I think it kind of has to be asked because part of how Emily and I met is our passion for writing. She's so fantastic in her fiction. I tend to lean a little bit more into the poetry side, but we are great idea people. We love
Great.
sharing different ideas and the kind of plot bunnies that come around. If you have any advice for anybody aspiring to have something picked up, an aspiring screenwriter or author or just an idea person, what advice do you have for them to get their work noticed by someone like you?
Yeah. So 2 pieces of advice. One is you really do need representation. It's tough because that's not easy. There's a definite chicken and egg there. Is that how do you get a rep without being produced, and how do you get produced without having a rep? And that I totally acknowledge that, and it's not easy. But for me and production companies like me, and certainly the bigger production companies, that Imagine and Bad Robot and so forth, that is just flooded with material, they're never going to look at just an individual reaching out. Hey, I wrote a script. Would you read it? They need an agent, a lawyer, a manager, known in the industry to say, we represent Emily and Mia. I wrote this great screenplay. Would you take a look at it? So you need representation. And to get that, what I recommend to people is who is representing writers that do the same kind of material you guys do. So if you're writing, small, and I don't know, I'm not saying you do, I'm just inventing something, small intimate dramas, who represents the writer of The Brutalist? Who represents the writer of Blue Valentine? Who represents the writer of American Fiction? And they represent those kind of people. Don't go to the agent of the guy who wrote the latest Superman movie. Don't go to the agent of somebody who's writing Star Wars movies or Marvel movies, because they're not in that world. So find a representative who represents people in the same mold and genre and size of what you're writing to. So that's my number one piece of advice. The other piece of advice is, it sounds a little bit like a trick, but I don't mean it in a con or dishonest way. I mean it in quite a totally upfront way. See, if you want to have a screenplay eventually and want to have something turned into a movie, is there a way that you can reverse engineer and publish it as a self-published novel, publish it as a novella or short story or a magazine article or a graphic novel, and then you have what's called IP. Then you can say, okay, it already exists in another format. So, and this is not uncommon. A lot of, not a lot, but I've certainly read stories of screenwriters who, especially when it's a true story, they really want to make this film into a true story. But it's incredibly difficult. So they'll pitch it as a magazine article. And then Vanity Fair or whomever else will pick it up as a magazine, or The Atlantic will pick it up as a magazine article, run with it. And then that same screenwriter says, hey, my article, which ran in The Atlantic, I've adapted to a screenplay. Do you want? And that just makes it so much easier. Okay, it already exists. There's already audience awareness. Some other format has vetted it and thinks it's worthy of public exposure. It just gives it so much validity as a screenplay than just a standalone screen.
Nice.
It sounds like very much somewhat intuitive, like know your audience a little bit on one hand and then foot in the door, but just like different aspects of that. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Any way you can. If you can get your work out there in any format, it'll help it be seen as a screenplay format.
Thank you for that. Sorry, excuse me. So most of what we watch and discuss on this podcast is like lower down on the IMDb. I actually I find a lot of sweetness in thinking about an actor who maybe it was their first big feature film, and even if it's a 23% on Rotten Tomatoes, like imagine how excited they were to like tell their mom they're going to be in a, and but so, I think there's a lot to be said with the idea of like, I didn't say it was good. I said I loved it. So do you have a kind of guilty pleasure film that you would recommend to us?
Yes, absolutely. There was a movie in the 90s. I'm a little embarrassed, but since you asked me point blank, I feel like this is a safe space.
It is.
It is. We're adding it to the list. But
I encourage you to watch and maybe do a show on this called Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man. Does that ring a bell at all?
No, but it sounds amazing.
It's a great title.
It's a fantastic title. It was in the 90s, and it was a buddy movie, not cop, but it was a buddy movie. And it was Harley Davidson was a character played by, Mickey Rourke. And he's yep. And this is when Mickey, before he went kind of crazy and nuts and just did weird things with his face. And here's the thing with Mickey Rourke is he's an odd character, but he is a great actor. Like you go back and look at the Pope of Greenwich Village, and you look at The Wrestler, and you look at the work he did. He's an amazing actor. So it's him and Don Johnson. And they're buddies, and they're kind of like both kind of.
This is getting better with each sentence that you're saying.
I can't even remember the plot, but I remember seeing that movie, and it was just so fun. It was just like unashamedly fun. And these two guys were just like, one is like a sort of a cowboy, Don Johnson. He's the Marlboro Man.
Right.
And then you've got Harley Davidson. So he's like a biker and a cowboy who are best friends and kind of both badass, and they hook up together. And I just remember watching that movie thinking, no one thinks this is going to win an Oscar. No one is trying to. No one thinks this is art, but boy, is it fun.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for that. There's been a couple movies that people have we've done for the show. People have reached out and been like, I can't believe you put that on your show. That's my favorite movie. I'm like, I'm so glad. Movies are so expensive to make. They take so much time. I'm glad somebody out there is like, that's my favorite
revive
movie.
them, get them seen. Yep.
Yes, exactly. So, all right. Well, I think that's all of our written questions.
I think that's
okay.
That's the way to end the written ones, I feel.
So, now we're off book. But okay, so Mia had mentioned that we met. The reason we know each other is through writing. I'm going to out us a little bit more. The reason we're actually friends is because of a character that Kat Dennings played in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Darcy Lewis.
Yeah.
So Kat Dennings is actually the reason that this podcast exists. And we watched Defendor, and I had not even realized that she was in it. So could you tell us about Defendor? Could you give us like some stories from there?
Well, I'll start with Kat because you let in that way. I had seen a movie, so we were looking to cast that role, and because we cast Woody first, and Woody and his agent at CAA liked the script and liked the project, so we had a little bit of heat. I'm not going to pretend we were the next Chris Nolan script, what everyone's clamoring to get into. But we had a little bit of heat. It was a bit of a buzzy project at the time. So we met with and had Jennifer Lawrence reading it and what's the Twilight?
Kristen Stewart.
Kristen Stewart, thank you. Yes, exactly. And I had just watched the movie. It was a high school movie. Robert Downey Jr. played the principal.
Is it Charlie Bartlett?
Charlie Bartlett.
Yes.
Thank you. You guys are good. You guys are walking IMDb's. I had just watched Charlie Bartlett. Really liked the movie. Really thought it was clever and fun and smart. And Kat Dennings was the female lead. And I put Kat Dennings forward. and we made her the offer, and she read it and liked it, and she met with Peter, the director, Peter Stebbings, and I, and we thought she was just great. And then we actually had lunch with Woody as well. I remember me, Peter Stebbings, Kat, and Woody all had lunch at a vegan restaurant, of course, because Woody's vegan. And they get it all like, and that I remember. Yeah, it's coming back, and this is God, take me back. But I remember now, the four of us had lunch, and the two of them had meeting for the first time. Just hit it off. So their chemistry was so great. They were having fun. They were teasing each other. They were playful, and I could just say, "Oh wow, look, these two are instant friends." Amazing on-screen chemistry. Mm-hmm. So that's how Kat came to be in the film. And as you guys know, you're fans. Great actor, great person, really great, perfect as that kind of snarky, sparky energy. Just perfect for the role.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was.
Yeah.
She's our special gal.
Suits so much. Yes.
Right.
The last 5+ years.
If it wasn't the very first role, it was really close to the first role for Tatiana Maslany, who of course went on to have a huge career from Black and the She-Hulk and various other things. She's done really well.
Mm-hmm.
Great actor.
Yeah, she was just like a little. I love that. I love catching like little roles that people say and like, oh, that person turned out to be Tatiana Maslany.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We've had that same experience with like people that we'll watch a movie for just because we see them in IMDb credits. And Emily's, I'm talking about Overlord, with your current favorite actor being, I saw his name and I said, okay, Joseph Quinn's in this movie, so we're going to put that on. He dies about 5 minutes in. So
if it's 5 minutes, right. I think he has a minute and 17 screen time. And we watch this whole movie for those 5 minutes.
That's funny.
So, all right, Miss Mia, anything else you want to know before we release Mr. Tabarrok?
Ask you just for one personal question. As writers, do you recommend, and it's something I've been dragging my feet on, is it time for me to make my own website as a writer?
Oh my God, no. I may be wrong, but my perception is that website is like my generation's social media. And it's so, my website is so out of date, and I don't think anyone goes to websites. Maybe I'm wrong. I would assume that if you want to reach people now, have a robust Instagram, TikTok. I guess Facebook is probably still very current. I guess I don't really like Facebook, but I think websites are old generation. I don't think I've ever gone to a writer's website. Honestly,
I can't begin to tell you how much of a relief that is because I'm so resistant to that change.
Mia has procrastinated enough that it is no longer something she has to worry about. So
no. If you're a DP or production design, something very visual, photographer, stills photographer, then I go to their website. So actually, I say I never go. That's actually not true. DPs, production designers, graphic designers, I don't really hire that much, or poster people when I want to post a design. Then it's really handy to have a website. But as a writer,
validated.
I wouldn't. I put zero, maybe it's a mistake, but I put zero time and effort in my website. Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been really, really wonderful. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Can I ask really quickly before we do let you go, how did you find us?
Okay, so confession.
That is a great question.
Yes.
I use this AI tool that reaches out and sources and scrubs all the millions of podcasts out there and send me suggestions of ones that are film and television and entertainment related. Mm-hmm. So I'm sort of new to podcasts. I don't do my own, and I've been on a handful, but I've been speaking on panels and teaching classes, and I taught actually for 3 months in Shanghai, which is a whole fun experience. So I like that kind of thing. So I thought maybe I should do more podcasting. So I use this little tool to go find me a bunch of podcasts that are in, I put these keywords in that are in my industry that I maybe have something to add to it. And it brought me yours.
Well, I'm so glad that it did.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been just lovely. Thank you so much. All right. Well,
I'm not going to lie and say that I hope we weren't your favorite, but I'm going to put it out there.
So far,
So
my
far.
favorite. Absolutely.
All right,
Absolutely.
good.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. All right. Well, Fangirl Film Clubbers, this has been a very special episode of the Fangirl Film Club. We will resume our regular scheduled programming next week with, was it Come to Daddy?
It was Come to Daddy for Elijah Wood.
Okay. So if you'd like to follow along, Nicholas, you're welcome to watch our films with us. But otherwise, thank you so much for listening, everybody, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.